everyone. How are y'all doing? I would like to know that I was on time actually, and StreamYard said not today, girl. I'm trying not to be bad. I went to log in at 5:28 because I was ready and it was saying that my thumbnail was too large. So it just posted it. So the thumbnail probably looks a mess. I had to like decompress it 5 times. I have no idea why. But, anyways, happy Thursday to y'all. Happy Thursday to y'all. Let me know if you can hear me. All right. And we're just going to hop into it. I should be calm in like 5 seconds. Me and the computer were going to get into an argument. And we're in an argument for the past 10 minutes. So I'm glad it's working now. We are going to talk about Jackson, Mississippi today and the water crisis, and specifically about environmental racism. And, something that often goes ignored, which is Black people in the South, and particularly around infrastructure. And I would say not just the South, because we're also going to talk about Flint, Michigan. So we are going to discuss all of that. And it's September. So in case you're wondering, hey, Kendron, I was so annoyed because a few people made bets with me on Instagram today that I wouldn't be on time. And I was like, no, I'm on time. And I was dedicated to being on time. And look at StreamYard. So I'm basically telling myself I was on time. I do not care. I was on time. I was sitting here. I will be drinking water this month, and I'm saying it out loud to force myself to do it. So we're gonna have a sober September. So yeah, if you see me, just have some wine for me though. I'll be having water in the wine glass. So we'll be having water and chill for the month of September. And to be honest, it's good to have a little cleanse. Every once in a while is like good for you. And I have a few stubborn pounds that are not coming off, and it's the mother effing wine. It's the wine, and it's going to drive me crazy. So here we go to that. Awesome. Yes, many don't realize environmental racism is a thing. So we are going to focus our live today on that, because it is a shame. And when you don't know, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And if you don't have the language to assess that, hey, this is a problem, then the problem goes undetected. So I think the more of us that are informed about environmental racism, the better, because then you can spot out like, hey, I knew something was going on in my neighborhood. This is nonsense. So sadly, that is going to come at the cost of Jackson, Mississippi today. All right. So I have this video. I figured we would start with a video of someone that lives in Jackson, Mississippi, which is Smith Woods. And here is his video. So one sec.
Mississippi is currently the war zone. It's crazy. I haven't had to use a bottle of water to brush my teeth and wash my face since I was deployed in the Middle East in combat. It's 2022. What's going on? Mind you, we've been in a boil water notice almost all summer, and before that, it happened like almost every other month. And then the governor went on yesterday and was saying how the citizens of Jackson, which is the largest city, most populated or whatever, that we're numb to it. We're not numb to having to boil our water just to have some type of clean water to use. It's actually very irritating, and it's tragic that nobody's done anything about it. This has been happening for years. Now we gotta like use bottled water just to brush our teeth so we're not breathing in the Mississippi River crickets. What's going on? Like, this is really insane. Like, Mississippi really needs to get it together, like, through and through. Like, this is not okay. It's Mississippi is.
Let me pause. Okay, good. Because I thought I was going to replay it. So, yes. So, if you haven't seen, there's feedback. It did that last time too. I don't know why. Well, his TikTok, that's where I pulled this from, because Tiana had posted it. So, shout out to Tiana. So, I was able to find him very easily. Let me make his TikTok bigger so y'all can check his TikTok out. Is smith.woods. So, the TikTok is on there as well, which is his explanation of what's going on currently since he lives in Jackson, Mississippi. And if you haven't seen it on the news, essentially what happened is over the weekend, today's Thursday, there were rising floodwaters in the city of Jackson, Mississippi, and it breached the city's, water treatment facility. So essentially the water treatment facility, they were already using the backup of the water treatment facility because it is in disrepair. And we will get to the specific demographics of Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi is overwhelmingly Black, around 82% Black. Mississippi as a whole is the Blackest state in the United States of America, which most people are not aware of. And to be honest, I was not aware of till like 2 years ago, which is to show you that there are plenty of Black people in the South and have remained systemically disenfranchised, as well as Black people in the North. So After that occurred, basically a state of emergency has been declared. To Smith's point, you cannot drink the water. You cannot use the water to brush your teeth. Some people cannot even flush their toilets. There is no running water in the entire state of Mississippi. Mississippi is also the entire city of Jackson, Mississippi. Sorry, not the state of Mississippi. Because if it was the state of Mississippi, they would act a little faster because there are also white people in other parts of Mississippi. But we'll get into the environmental racism aspect of that in 2 seconds. Okay, hold on. Okay, so environmental racism. All right, so this is from, hold on, because I wanted to make sure that, because where did it go? I'm going to drop them in here, and then I'm going to also link the research reports as well if you want to read them. They are very insightful. So this one specifically is from the Natural Resources Defense Council, as well as the Environmental Justice Health Alliance and Coming Clean. So they did a nationwide study, which I know y'all can't see that because I cannot see it. And their analysis revealed that given a county's racial, housing, economic vulnerability, that is directly related to drinking water violations. So essentially, they found that the rate of drinking water violations were greater in counties with a greater percentage of their population with high racial, ethnic, and language vulnerability. And they categorized language vulnerability. Specifically, it was mostly Black and brown people, so Black and Hispanic people in these areas. And then for Hispanic demographics, that's specifically lower rates of English-speaking people in those demographics, often in rural areas of the country. So racial, ethnic, and language vulnerability in housing and transportation quality had the strongest relationships, specifically tied to drinking water, which we've seen this before. So when the county or the city is predominantly Black or Hispanic, it is more likely, the study found, that the EPA was notified that there are violations of federal regulations about the drinking water. That generally speaking, the county was like, the water plant is fine. You could drink the water. Like, whatever, it's fine. Which we have heard all of this before in Flint, Michigan. Okay, so in case, it's been a long time about Flint, Michigan, so I figured a run through of what occurred in Flint, Michigan would be helpful. So in April of 2014, Flint, Michigan basically began drawing water from the Flint River to approximately 100,000 residents who were mostly Black residents. The move was considered temporary, and essentially they were trying to connect to a new regional waterway system. That turned into a giant debacle. In 2015, this started in April of 2014, nearly a year later, y'all know math is not my ministry, what's that, like 8-9 months? 8-9 months later, let me make myself a little smaller. The city of Detroit offered to reconnect Flint to its water systems, but the government in Flint, the city government said, the water was safe. So they kept encouraging at multiple times the Black residents of Flint, Michigan to continue to drink this water. Now, mind you, people in Flint had complained and said, I can smell the water. The water is brown. There's some issues. Like, I don't think we should drink that. And city officials constantly kept telling them, no, drink the water. Drink the water. The water is fine. September 24th, 2015, mind you, I'm just going to keep repeating, this all started in April 2014. A group of doctors urged Flint to stop using the Flint River after finding high levels of lead in children's blood. So they started testing the children. They're like, this is a bad idea. The state regulators then insisted that the water was safe, purposefully telling Black people again, and mind you, in terms of economic vulnerability, these are mostly poor Black people who were subjected to this. In 2015 of September as well, the governor, Rick Snyder, he pledged to take action in response to the lead levels. And this was the first acknowledgement by the state that there was a lead issue. So over a year later, the state finally was like, okay, fine, I guess we should fess up that, there's lead in that water. We've been telling these little Black kids to drink it. We should probably stop doing this. It continued to get worse. They then, the Department of Environmental Quality Control Director, Diane Dan Wyatt, he then resigned. So a few resignations happened. An elderly Black man also died. So then I think it was 4 citywide officials were charged with manslaughter. All of those charges were dropped. They attempted, and this happened a few months ago, they attempted to charge the actual governor, like, hey, you knew, and you kept telling these people to drink this stuff. And the judge said, no, you can't charge him with anything. So no one has been criminally convicted for anything that occurred to Flint, to the residents of Flint, Michigan. It was not until January 15th, 2016, nearly 2 years after this started, that an independent review occurred. All right, well, let me make this a little bit bigger so I can see too. Oh, okay. Hold on, where am I? Okay. In 2019, this is 5 years later now, April 16, 2019, 5 years later, a special prosecutor who spent 3 years leading the criminal investigation of the Flint water scandal. Like, saying it's a scandal, in my opinion, is a bit disingenuous. Y'all purposely kept telling these people to drink this water. It's much bigger than a scandal. Was fired in the fallout from discovery of 23 boxes of records in the basement of a state building. So during the investigation, I guess they got very sloppy and were like, oh, okay, I suppose. In June 13th of 2019, the prosecutors dropped all criminal charges against 8 people in the Flint water scandal, and they pledged to start the investigation from scratch. This is 5 years later. So they said, you know what, we didn't do a good job. We're going to restart this whole process. In 2020, the Michigan Supreme Court finally told the residents of Flint, Michigan, you know what? I'm really sorry that also has occurred. You can finally sue the state of Michigan. Because this whole time, people were like, okay, you have poisoned my child. You have poisoned me. All of these issues have occurred. An elderly man died. At least let us sue them while you figure out whether or not you're going to charge them. And the state took forever to finally allow them to sue. In August of 2020, a $600 million deal between the state and the residents of Flint harmed by the lead-tainted water was announced after more than 2 years of negotiation. And I would say 2 years of negotiation on top of, that's 6 years, 4 years of the state waiting to even allow them to sue. And to be honest, I'm not sure those people even got paid out, just to be very clear. And this is not the reason for bringing up Flint, Michigan. Usually when people think of water issues in the United States and things that have shocked America for some reason, the example is always Flint, Michigan. And people use that as oh, this is a one-off example of, in Michigan, they didn't have the infrastructure and, they kind of forgot about them poor Black people. No, it's everywhere. It's systemic. There are enough data and graphs in the report I showed. To be honest, that report is very high academic, which I was like, oh, we're not about to go through this graph. It's a little complicated. And it took too long for me to understand how it worked, to be honest, as somebody who this is a little bit different, this type of research into environmental racism. But the data is all there and has been said many different ways, in that the Environmental Protection Agency has done numerous studies to say unequivocally that if you live in a disenfranchised Black or Hispanic neighborhood that happens to also be systemically into forced poverty, has been forced into poverty, you are more likely than not going to experience water issues. It is more likely than not going to happen to you. And the state government, the federal government likely don't give a damn. And they will continue for it to happen until things like Flint, Michigan, and what's occurring in Jackson, Mississippi occur, which is, this is not a surprise to anybody. Everyone knew, we should probably fix this. And they don't fix it. They don't allocate money, because the way that taxes are set up, and I've talked about this before, having lived in very gentrified Brooklyn and seeing the neighborhood change over the years, the amount of investment into the neighborhood now versus the amount of investment when I first moved into the neighborhood is night and day. And that is because the complexion of the neighborhood is slowly changing. And it is very annoying to see. Now, when I first heard about this going on in Jackson, Mississippi, it immediately reminded me of Hurricane Katrina and the response to Hurricane Katrina. So Hurricane Katrina, let me pull up the exact dates, occurred August 29th. 2005. And Hurricane Katrina is, in my opinion, probably the worst disaster that has happened in the way it was handled in the United States. And New Orleans, if you're not familiar, is a predominantly, or was, you know, I'd still be holding on, was a predominantly Black city and had been for hundreds of years. So in Hurricane Katrina, overall, 1,836 people died. In Louisiana alone, 1,577 of people unfortunately lost their life. The majority of those people were Black and poor, and there was disproportionately the majority of those people that unfortunately lost their life were Black, poor, and elderly, which is why when people make very uninformed, foolish comments about people who live in hurricane areas. Miami is a hurricane area. Why didn't they leave? Why didn't they do this? If you are older and you are poor and you are maybe disabled, how are you gonna, how is that possible? You can't just hop a bus. Like the bus system, I used to live in New Orleans. The bus system, I used to go on the trolley, the streetcar sometimes. I don't recall. I don't think I ever went on the bus, but I used to go on the streetcar. The bus system in Miami is laughable. I used to take the bus every once in a while, and taking the bus was just like rolling dice. It's like, all right, the bus might come in an hour, it might not come, but we're going to sit here. The bus does what it wants to do because they don't fund those things. So in terms of Hurricane Katrina, they did a huge study. So the environmental justice through the eyes of Hurricane Katrina onto A, why did the levees break? B, okay, the levees broke, but the response to Hurricane Katrina. Why did it take GW an entire week to get off of his behind and go to New Orleans? It took that man a whole week for him to be like, oh yeah, I guess I should go check on, you know, those citizens. I suppose I should do that. For context, 80% of the homes in New Orleans were destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. And this graph specifically from that study shows in terms of the floodwater, how long the floodwater remained in certain neighborhoods disproportionately. So the first set of the graph is August 31st. Hurricane Katrina occurred August 29th, so 2 days later, and September 8th, a week and change. A week and a half later, how much of the floodwater was still there. So African Americans are here in the dark purple, and you have 67% of the floodwater was still there, and then 60% a week and a half later, as in they let the floodwater sit there in predominantly Black neighborhoods, which caused even more issue. A lot of the people, unfortunately, that passed away in Hurricane Katrina, a large proportion of them unfortunately drowned. And the larger proportion of them, people that passed away, it is because they got diseases from the nasty ass water, which was unnecessary, was completely unnecessary and could have been avoided. And so I realized we didn't say it. The concept of environmental racism, hold on, let's go back, is addressing racism through the lens of what is happening in terms of the environment, of course, and in terms of anything having to do with natural systems. So like water, anything related to hurricanes, natural disasters, where you put a power plant. There are studies that show most power plants are put in what? Poorer neighborhoods. It is so blatant that once it is explained, it is very easy to spot out like, oh yeah, that's why the highway is running through my neighborhood. In terms of looking at New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina, a lot of the studies then showed that the predominantly poorer Black neighborhoods, because there are rich Black people in New Orleans as well, predominantly poorer Black neighborhoods were sitting on lower elevation levels. And those specific neighborhoods, because they were on lower elevation levels, were more susceptible to flooding. And maybe, I forgot when they built the I-10. They built I-10, which is like the huge highway in New Orleans. They built the I-10 through poor Black neighborhoods as well, which also basically like messed up the foundation of those neighborhoods and made them more susceptible to flooding. So like where I used to live was on the corner, was like basically where Holly Grove and Mid-City meet. And what was wild to me when I moved to New Orleans in 2013, so in August of 2013, 8 years after Hurricane Katrina, you could still see the effects of Hurricane Katrina in Holly Grove. You could still see the trees that were downed into people's houses that were never able to move back into those houses. There are still lawsuits going on from people affected by Hurricane Katrina. There is now a huge lawsuit going on, which they should be very ashamed of themselves, the state, for doing this, where essentially after people tried their best to move back into New Orleans, they have turned New Orleans into a very wild gentrification project, to note. The people that were able to move back, they needed to build their houses essentially a bit higher. So that way, if a flood occurred, their house wouldn't be wiped out again. They received funds from the state. The state specifically told them they could do these things. Most of these people, again, are older Black people. The state is now going back and saying, we didn't tell you that you could do that with that money, and suing people for the around $50,000 to $125,000 they gave them to fix their house, stating that the home improvements they made were not in ordinance with what the state told them to do, which is, again, objectively wild. Okay, let's continue. Now back to Mississippi. Okay, where are we? All right. So it is sad, to be honest, and very non-surprising that this is going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And what I think is very interesting is the coverage now is finally becoming national. When the coverage first started, it was mostly publications such as Mississippi Today and other publications down south being like, yo, what are you doing? Like, this town of 82% of the people in Jackson, Mississippi are Black, predominantly Black. About 25% of people in Jackson, Mississippi live under the poverty line. Or is that, I think that was the number actually for New Orleans. That's the number for New Orleans. That's not the number for Jackson. I have to look up the number for Jackson. A significant amount of people live under the poverty line. I would assume the numbers are probably similar, if not maybe a smidge higher, to be honest. There's more industries in New Orleans. And what is interesting is all of the articles in Mississippi Today did a very good job in documenting of this. All of the articles are stating, oh, we are not surprised. To Smith's point in the TikTok we watched at the beginning of this is not a surprise to any resident of Jackson, Mississippi. However, it is a slap in the face, and it is rude and very disingenuous from the governor to be like, oh, they've been under a boil notice. A boil notice, if you've never had one, is when the city tells you, you know what, that tap water that you pay for, because you pay for in your taxes, it's not good. It's all right though, so you could drink it. You just need to boil it first. They're usually, after hurricanes, they usually do boil notices in Miami. Like, you just get used to it. Listen, sorry, we're not talking about B. We're not talking about B. If you're not familiar. So for the governor, who we're going to specifically get into the governor because he's a piece of work, to be like, they're desensitized to this, is disingenuous and unequivocally wrong. Just because you continuously treat people bad does not mean people are just like, I guess, and just accept it. People have been complaining. People have been showing up to the city in the town hall meeting to be like, what the hell is going on? I've been paying my taxes and y'all are treating me like we're in a war zone, to his point. All right, so let's get into this. So this is a specific article by Anna Wolf of the Mississippi Today. And so just so we can see in terms of the demographics, so population is 82% African American. Jackson is the single Blackest large city in the nation. Roughly 1 in 4 residents. Oh, okay, it was 25%. I was like, is it right? 1 in 4 residents live in poverty, and in some West and South Jackson communities, the hardest hit by water outages, the average household pulls an income of $25,000 and as low as $15,000 in some pockets. And I think it's important to talk about specifically the amounts of money that people are forced to live under, because it's not sustainable. And one of the larger issues, which we won't spend like too much time on it, is there are multiple issues hitting Jackson all at one time. They have been left behind by the state of Mississippi purposely. The city of Jackson is trying to hold on. Their billing system has been running wild, to be honest, in the city. And it has compounded itself where the average person hurt is somebody who's already struggling. And if we live in, allegedly, which, I don't believe this, but allegedly, according to those people, the best country in the world, we live in the richest country in the world. How do we live in a country that is allegedly so rich and doing so good, but you have people who have literally, their family has built this country and are living with $15,000 a year? The American government and American people and anybody who lives here, collectively, we should all be ashamed. We should all be ashamed if we are forcing people into poverty. So the capital city, to one of how this has compounded over time to get worse, the capital city has lost roughly 40,000 residents. It is decreasing population size. Residents since the population peaked at about 200,000 in 1980. And the reason, it's always racism, because this is America. After an initial wave of white residents left to avoid putting their children in integrated schools. Mind you, 1980, Mississippi did not integrate their schools for a long time. There is a documentary by Morgan Freeman. He is, I believe he's also from Mississippi. And I think I watched a documentary years ago. I think it's about his high school and how if I watched this years ago, I'm trying to think, was I in school when I watched it? Maybe in the 2010s. I can't remember when I watched it. In the 2010s, maybe, why his high school that he attended is still having segregated prom. Segregated prom, just so you know how this is working. So essentially, half the decline occurred in the last 2 decades as more middle-class Black families, they also left Jackson, Mississippi, and the city's white population continued to drop from 52% in 1980, because again, they didn't want to send their children to school with Black children, okay, to 28% in 2000 to roughly 17% in 2019. Now, what occurs and what has occurred and how the water treatment system works across the country is you pay your water bill, and what you pay into for your water bill is supposed to upkeep the water treatment system. So Jackson, Mississippi is unfortunately facing a decline in population, less people to pay the bill. Less people to pay the bill. However, people still need running water, of course. So the city, not only are there less people to pay the bill, unfortunately, the city, because the city, and we'll get into it, has been, according to differing people in the city, historically defunded because white people have fled. And so there's less tax base, there's less state government. The state of Mississippi is like, give money to Jackson, it's the capital, but like, whatever about that. So the infrastructure of the water treatment plant was already in disrepair. So not only are you not able to keep up the water treatment plant, you're not able to even fix a damn thing. So it is sitting there getting worse, and people are then getting forced to have to boil their water and now can't even flush the toilet. Okay, so let's continue. As we all know, and we all know why, Roberts is one of the activists who was interviewed in this article, said nobody wants to invest in Jackson because of who runs Jackson and who lives in Jackson, because white folks don't dominate here anymore. They just want to keep on letting stuff break until we break and go away. That's what it feels like. And they're not going to break and they're not going to go away. And I'm very proud of them for not doing that, for being like, oh, screw y'all, we're still going to live here and it's us. It is what it is. And I think it is more incumbent on the rest of us to speak out about these things, particularly in places, I would say probably the South and the Midwest are very much impacted, of places that are basically holdouts of predominantly Black spaces. Predominantly Black spaces of people who've been like, I've been here for hundreds of years. I'm not leaving for what? For why? To go get treated bad somewhere else? Like, no, y'all need to fix it. And there are, watching gentrification occur in Brooklyn, it becomes so apparent of, wait, so the city of New York could have been fixed these issues? I've been staring at this pothole for 5 years, but now that I have more white neighbors, the pothole is gone? So my taxpayer money wasn't good enough to fix a pothole? Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And you see that happen at a very rapid pace. And what happened in New Orleans, because Hurricane Katrina drove the majority of Black people out, were unable to afford that, even though the federal government was like, yeah, we gave some people some money. FEMA eventually gave people money after George was like, oh yeah, I done got called out. And you know what? Back in the day when Kanye used to say sensible things, when Kanye West called George Bush a racist on national television, honestly, good for him. Good for him. And shout out to him for saying that, because for some odd reason, being called that word sparks a fire in certain people. It was after that George Bush was like, oh yeah, and was ahead of it and went on whole press tours as to combat why this rapper called him a racist. I will never forget, and I can't, and I'm only forgetting like who interviewed him, because the answer to me was so objectively wild to watch as a preteen teenager. I was like, this man is not sensible. When George Bush was asked on national television, an interview, what was the worst part of his presidency? And if you're younger, as a reminder, 9/11 occurred during GW's presidency, Hurricane Katrina, the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan. All of this occurred during GW, and I'm probably missing one. Lots of commotion occurred. This man answered, it might have been Matt Lauer. This man answered and said, when Kanye West called me a racist, I'm not a hater, but, and then went into this like guilt-fueled like rant. Sir, all of these tragedies have occurred. People have lost their life. You have twiddled your thumb and you're over here mad that this man called you a racist? Objectively wild. Objectively wild. Being called a racist to some people is worse than being an actual racist, which is interesting. And I think we should call more people racist then when they do racist things, because as long as the action to fix things gets done, I don't really care. I don't really care about the feelings behind it. Which brings me to, we'll see if you think he's a racist. The governor of Mississippi. So this is the governor of Mississippi. He's a very interesting person. Let me make him a little bit bigger. Hold on one second, because I know his first name is Tate, and I don't know why for the life of me, I'm forgetting what the hell his last name is. Reeves. Okay, Governor Reeves. Governor Tate Reeves. And I am not surprised that Governor Tate Reeves is denying money to the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi. I'm not surprised. Oh, that is what I'm forgetting. Hold on. Hold the thought. I want to pull something up midway. So, because I just want to show how wild this is. So let me pull it up here before I forget. Okay, perfect. I'm really not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. So they have a tradition because racist people love to just be like, well, it's the tradition. It can't be wrong. It's just the way it is. Like, yes, it can. Yes, it can. Like, what are you talking about? There is a tradition in Mississippi. It is written into the Mississippi Constitution that states when you are the governor, you reproclaim Confederate Heritage Month. And there is a day in Confederate Heritage Month that everyone has the day off. Shameful. I'm not surprised. It is still objectively very shameful. So, of course, because he believes in tradition, even if the tradition is foolishness. And also, to me, I have always questioned the sense of people that are like, well, I want my month, I want my Heritage Month. So I'm like, okay, so what is the mascot? Like someone losing? Like, what does this look like? I'm very confused. So in response to a question at a news conference, Governor Reeves said he issued Confederate Heritage Month proclamation in the same manner and fashion that he said 5, it was actually 4 governors that came before him did. And we did it again this year. Didn't think that this year was the year to stop doing it. Didn't think that, we should stop the racism. He's like, oh, what's the problem? What's the problem? Lord. Now, shout out, hold on, let me make this bigger. Shout out to Ashton Pittman of the Mississippi Free Press for this very witty and petty article that I very much appreciated. Systemic racism built Mississippi, but Governor Reeves says it doesn't exist. So during Confederate Heritage Month, Governor Reeves in his speech proclaimed there is not systemic racism in America. What? How do you think them Black people got to Mississippi? Sir, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yes, they changed their flag from he budged and he changed the flag from, and it wasn't just him, it was all the state senators. They unanimously voted to change the flag to where they removed the Confederate part, and there's a magnolia there. The magnolia there now. But it is just so interesting to me that somebody who is denying what built systemic racism built this whole country. Systemic racism most definitely built the state of Mississippi. Sir. And what I found interesting in the article, it goes on to talk about the one Democrat governor of Mississippi was like, oh, so Governor Reeves, then I guess if he's supporting this, he should support us teaching actual history in that, what built the Confederacy and why did it topple and all these things. And he was like, oh, but that's not what he means. He's not that bright. And I was like, okay, I appreciate a petty former governor shade. Now, of course, somebody who has such strong ties to the Confederacy, he blocked a lot of the funding for Jackson Park improvement, and specifically for their planetarium. The people of Jackson, Mississippi, in his opinion, did not deserve a planetarium. And the quote was, "Jackson is not one suburban golf course and one planetarium away from thriving," Reeves said, adding the city should focus on its crumbling infrastructure and crime. Until then, these projects will never be viable. Who is responsible for the crumbling infrastructure? What occurred when the majority of the white residents of Jackson, Mississippi moved into the suburbs? They just moved next door. So they don't pay taxes to Jackson, Mississippi. They pay taxes to their specific suburb. They usually, like in Miami, they call them villages, towns. They have their own ordinances and they have their own water systems. When they did all of that, the state of Mississippi said, "Oh, good. That money we were giving Jackson, we don't got to give it to them. We're just going to give it to the suburbs around it where the other white people live." But according to Reeves, people in Jackson, Mississippi don't deserve nice things because they're poor. Poor people don't deserve nice things, in his opinion, is all I got from this. So, Reeves said the state was willing to match Jackson's water and sewage infrastructure spending and criticized the city for only putting up $25 million of the $42 million in federal American Rescue Plan acts to fund its received work. So they got $42 million. They wanted to put $25 million towards the sewage and water restructuring because it is crumbling. And Lord, y'all know math in my ministry. Let's just do the math right here. Okay, so that leaves $17 million. So they said, okay, the majority of this is going to go to the water. We need to fix the water. Please help us. We're just a little city. We're also the capital, so you should be ashamed. Help us with the water. And they wanted to do $13 million to improving the parks because people should be allowed to go to a nice, clean park. The planetarium, which is for learning. What's wrong with everyone learning? And the remainder, that would have been $13. The remainder, $4 million, was split into other things. He took large issue to the idea that a golf course would also be added to the park. Why? Why can't people? Specifically, those Jackson vetoes, in addition to the project, were, this is what specifically the mayor vetoed, $250,000 for work at the Briarwood pool. He said, y'all don't need to swim. $1 million for a parking lot at the Jackson Convention Center. No, y'all don't need to come to our convention center. $2 million for the city of Jackson's planetarium. And you know what this reminds me of? There are a lot of people of the mindset that love to pocket watch poor people. And they're like, oh, you're on food stamps, but your kids are wearing Jordans. You're on food stamps, but your nails are done, as if poor people are supposed to look destitute. Like, oh, you know what? You have to look like you are on your last before I feel any modicum of empathy or want to help. And that is disgusting behavior. It is absolutely disgusting behavior. Also, I think it is very insidious, blocking $250,000 for work at the pool when this country has a horrible history of not allowing Black people to learn to swim, of not allowing Black people access to the swimming pools, of literally when Black people would go into the swimming pool, draining out the entire pool and being like, oh, it was dirty now. The pool is in disarray. People are unable to go into the pool. You know how hot it is in Mississippi? Mississippi, similar to New Orleans, is all in the Delta. It sits very low. It's like, I don't know if Jackson specifically is in a swamp. New Orleans is in a swamp. Shit is hot. It is hot as hell outside. Why shouldn't people be allowed to go into the public pool? Awful. Just an awful person. And so, before we get to, well, water time for me and wine time for y'all, what I found even more wild about this is this tweet I saw on the Twitter as I was perusing. Hold on, because the last time I tried to say something, it didn't want to work. So I was like, okay, can you see it? Okay, perfect. Let me remove myself so y'all can see it. Hopefully it doesn't, actually, I'll turn the sound off because the sound is irrelevant. Okay. So this is from Comeback Squid on YouTube. Guess what this big ass tank outside of the governor's mansion is. So this big tank is sitting in front of the governor's mansion, which is Governor Reeves' mansion in Jackson, Mississippi. So hold on, let me turn the volume off so it doesn't echo for y'all because it's not saying anything. There's his mansion, there's the tank. And the allegation is that that tank is a water tank. To which Governor Reeves then got and was like, oh, well, that is not a designated site. There are designated sites, and, we are not getting water from that truck there. What is it doing? Sunbathing? What is the truck doing, sir? Like, that's like when you see something and people are like, I see you're seeing it, but listen to my words. It's like, but I can see that. Like, I'm not blind. We're all looking at it. Like, what is happening? What? Disgusting behavior. So on that point, let's go ahead and go through the comments. And I would to note, the issues are still going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And as of the last time I checked, the last news article, they are trying to work around solutions, but indefinitely, as in they do not know when they're going to fix it, which is such a shame. And yes, Joseph Biden passed that infrastructure bill recently. So yes, the state of Mississippi has received money. Shouldn't the majority of that money go towards fixing the Capitol, where a large portion of people live? But the federal government cannot tell states what to do. Like, we have separation of state and federal, and that causes issues when you live in a state that is overwhelmingly racist and is like, but it's just Negroes over there. Nope, good. I earmarked the money for somebody else. Which is very sad. So Kevin, he's making buttermilk. Must be. It's probably unseasoned. He probably ain't got no salt in it. But yes, so let's go through the comments. So if you're just tuning in, it's just comments and forehead now. So, and I would say in terms of, hold on. There is a place, because I knew I was forgetting something, for mutual aid where you can donate. And I wanted to put that. What is happening with the computer? What? Hold on. I thought my computer logged me out of Discord, and I was like, this is going to be a problem. Okay, let me put where did I put it? Here we go. I wanted to share this for Cooperation Jackson, to support the residents of Jackson. So here you go. And I'll make sure to pin that in the comment as well. So you can donate to that, and that money is supposed to go directly to the residents of Jackson. Okay, so let's go through the comments now. So I was like, I'm forgetting something important, and that's what it was. All right. Awesome. Ooh, homemade plum wine sounds great. I wonder, this is She Who Succeeds. This is a good point. Thank you. Only when you play a screen share video, you have to mute your mic. I wonder if when I mute my mic, does it mute the sound too? Actually, I mean, I'll try it afterwards. But okay, I'm going to try that. Thank you. Wild. Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado are facing a shortage because of past white laws that have allowed overuses of the land and water. Oil is more valuable than clean water. It is going on, and which is why there are a lot of people who rightfully are, hey, the presidential election is important, but your local election, these local state senators are shiesty if they're doing their job. Like, you have to be on them like white on rice, because very few people are paying attention to what happens in the local election. Like, you got to go, the community town halls, at least like in New York, are a little bit easier now. They're all on Zoom. So you can go on Zoom and cause a full-on ruckus. In some places, they are only in person. But we have to start holding these people accountable, because when no one pays attention, they just do whatever the corporation, lobbied them to do, aka paid them to do. I have huge qualms with lobbying. It's strange to me. It's like legalized bribing. I don't understand it. Hey, New Nubian. Oh, good. I'm glad they're talking about it on CNN. Hey, Jamila, how are you? Child, every day I learn of new things where that man just let us down. Sir. Alicia, Flint folks had scaly skin, coughs, and all kinds of skin irritation. Shaking my head. Also, we've had proper lead tests, probably improper, I think, lead tests since the 70s. these are ongoing issues that the issue is never new. The issue is never like all of a sudden. It's like, oh no, we've been treating these Black people bad. Yes, definitely. I don't believe they have clean water yet. In terms of, oh, this is for Flint. I think we're on the Flint section yet. Flint does, however, because I was looking up, because for years afterwards, they didn't have clean water for many years afterwards. And around 2019, I think 2020, definitively, the scientists said, like, oh, the water is clean. But rightfully so, people in Flint are like, I don't believe or trust y'all anymore ever again. So people are very reluctant to drink the water, rightfully. So I think the right thing for the government to do would be to subsidize giving people, and maybe not bottled, plastic is awful, but giving people water that's not coming from their tap. Because if I lived there, I would never drink it either. I'd be like, You had multiple city officials, multiple people who are in charge, who are supposed to be looking out for you, telling people, not drink the water. Doctors came in and told people, stop drinking the water. And the governor said, ignore the doctor. I know everything. I know everything in the water is fine. Objectively wild. Oh, I was just in New Orleans early this week. Very jealous. I hope you had all the crawfish and had so much fun. Is it crawfish season right now? What month are we in? September? Maybe not. I think it might have ended. And this story popped up on the news out there, and I was just horrified. I haven't seen this reported on in Chicago yet. I hope they report on this nationwide, because the concept of environmental racism is nationwide. But because it's so rarely reported, people are not privy to the fact that, like, oh no, we are getting screwed. Always this. Very interesting. Very interesting. Hi, Aunt Judy. How are you? Listen, the Ministry of War has enough money, apparently. Also, this is unrelated but related, and why I'm back to calling him Joseph. Joseph doubled down and said that he does not believe in defunding the police. He's giving the police more money, even though he campaigned and said, all right, I'll consider, reallocating. They have defunded the education system. We talked about this in depth last week. So the idea that Joseph is like, oh, I know I said that, but whatever, is why I keep calling that man Joseph. He does not choose to actually do things for people, for the people that actually campaigned for him, voted him to power. I'm like, okay, I guess we're getting this, and let's try. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with our 10 to 20K. Oh, Terracotta Kim, the water is still bad in Flint. Oh, thank you for letting me know. Still bad in Flint, always in Black areas. Mississippi is ranked the worst in every category, from education, healthcare, companies, etc. Yes, Mississippi is the poorest poorest state in this country, purposefully, because again, the majority of people in Mississippi are what? They are Black. 40% of Mississippi is Black. And 40% of Mississippi is not just Black, is poor Black people who have purposely been kept systemically poor. If this country, and I'm trying to figure out ways to just work it in to every video, if this country actually gave Black American people, like the people who all live in Mississippi, reparations would include fixing the systemically ruined infrastructure. There was, I can't remember the man's name, a football player, and he was like really good, and he was from Mississippi, and they did one of those, call them 40 minutes, 90 minutes or something. I feel like Washington College, 60 minutes or something like that on him. And he was from Mississippi, and he was saying, I think we were the same age. So if I'm 31, he was an older person, that he grew up and they did not have indoor plumbing. This is unacceptable in the alleged richest country in the world. And then you have people walking around like Trump in Mar-a-Lago that have literal gold toilets and gold sinks and gold everything. Child. Alicia, the planning of neighborhood dereliction is very real. Yeah, it's very purposeful. Where to put those who lack housing and who gets clean water, where to rehouse people. In Miami, Miami is going through wild amounts of gentrification as well. In Miami, the interesting thing was, for years, the city put project buildings. Liberty City is very close to the beach. So now that They are having mass gentrification. People are like, oh, we can move to Miami. Miami is trying to become an actual city. Like for a long time, there wasn't much things in Miami. There was nightlife, there were strip clubs, and there was Publix. So now they're putting things in Miami. More people are coming in, more people with money. They are pushing people out. So they are literally relocating people, because if you live in government housing, they are allowed to relocate you. And where they're relocating them is just flabbergasting and awful. So you're taking people who have grown up by the beach and have like, listen, Section 8 housing is not built up to code half the time. It's not generally nice. But at least, very least, the consolation, okay, there's a beach. I could go relax myself. Fine. They are moving because they consider Black people a nuisance in Miami. There is a very long conversation we could have about how it is to grow up Black in Miami and how Miami historically treats Black people, even though Black Americans and Caribbean people have built large parts of Miami from the 1800s. It's very interesting. So they're relocating people and they're moving people from close proximity to the beach, where now they're like, oh, this is prime real estate. We don't want you over here anymore. And they're putting them way down south in Homestead, which is the middle of freaking nowhere, way down south. There's nothing nice over there. And there's less infrastructure. Oh, child, it's disgusting. Exactly this. Oh, I have to tell, this reminds me of a joke. America is supposedly the most powerful nation in the world, but can't provide clean water for its citizens. So I went to Kenya. I saved up all my pennies and I went to Kenya for my birthday in March that had just passed. And also, if you've never been, highly recommend. The people of Kenya, so freaking nice. So a beautiful place. And I love to be surrounded by, other Black people. It was amazing. It was amazing. The food is also really good. The scenery is nice. And the people are great. So speaking of the people, in one of the hotels we stayed at, the US required like all this documentation to get back into the US. And it was, I think, like 8 pages of documentation you had to print out and you had to fill it out manually. I was like, why can't we do this online? Whatever. So I asked the receptionist, I was like, oh, hey, can I pay to get this printed? She's like, oh, no, we'll print it for you. How many pages is it? And I was like, oh, it's 8 and 8, so 16. So she burst out laughing and she was like, isn't America supposed to be the greatest country in the world? Our Kenyan one is online. And I was like, yeah, girl, it's a raggedy mess. It's a raggedy mess. Like it makes no sense. Makes no sense. Oh my gosh. Miami and Broward have horrible transit system. Horrible transit system in Miami and Broward. Listen, that is still one of the funniest things. One of the funniest things when he said that about George Bush, and George Bush lost his mind. That was, to him, that was the worst thing anybody could say. But yes. Thank you, Alicia. If you haven't already, go ahead and like, subscribe. I always forget during the live to say this. Fad Heel just joined. I hope we were talking about Beyonce based on the title. I'm sorry. It fits so well. And since I used a piece of her Formation clip for the beginning when Big Frida's voice is playing, what happened to New Orleans. So I figured it'd be good. Sky Griff. Mississippi got like $500 million in federal funding. So it's the politicians in that state that are misappropriating funds. The money is there. They could help them people. It is because of the complexion of the people. And to the person, to Robert's point, in the article that was interviewed, that he feels like they're trying to purposely break people. And I would agree. I would agree. Having seen that in New York, in Brooklyn, so how gentrification, at least in Brooklyn, how it has occurred, has been like a wild thing to watch in real time. You have people, mostly corporations and wealthy white people, that will call and harass elderly Black people that own their brownstone, and they will harass them. They will give them a low price and then take up the whole block. Or some people be like, absolutely not. I know that this brownstone now is worth mad money because you want to put somebody else in it. I want my cash. And they'll sell it. They'll sell the brownstone, but overwhelmingly the majority of people have been bamboozled out of where they live. Bamboozled. So the whole neighborhood is changing to where now, I just have to get it off my chest. Gentrifiers in Brooklyn have done this very odd thing. I cannot stand it, which is turn Biggie Smalls into a literal mascot. He's everywhere. Biggie this. And I'm like, first of all, do y'all even listen to this? Second of all, it's very strange behavior. They just want murals of Black people, but not actual Black people in the neighborhood. So there's that. We're seeing it all over the place in the US. I mean, it's likely. I agree, Adrian. It's probably likely. Exactly. Tenebreification. Hopefully I said that right. We live in the richest country in the world due to exploitation of the poor and marginalized. Yes. And due to the fact that capitalism works when you prey on others, which we're going to do a video. I said this on Instagram about how Black capitalism cannot save Black people. And I've been wanting to do it for a long time and we've talked about it. So I have written most of it out, but I was waiting for, one of them to set it off again. So that way it would be good timing. And since Jay-Z is upset that we, the poor Blacks, are not worshiping him and are not glad that his one drop of representation is not helping us, the idea that people have bamboozled themselves in their mind that representation is an end goal instead of a starting point of liberation is mind-boggling to me. Sir, he listed in, what is the name of the song? God, something God. I don't know. With DJ Khaled. He listed, because he loves to tell people that he's a billionaire. So he was like, oh, there's 3 of us, and started naming off the other 3. And I was like, sir, there are 30 million Black people in this country, and you name 4 billionaires. What is that drop in the bucket supposed to do? It is not trickle down economics. That's not helping us. So he's upset because it's not enough for them to just be rich. They need the adoration. They need us to believe in it. They need us to hype them up. And it's like, no, we're not being your hype man anymore. We're tired. We're tired of being exploited. All right. Jewel Scott, I love the mods who do their job. LOL, respect to Jonathan and Life of Brand. Well, good. I didn't see it, so thank you to you both. Yes, housing segregation is everywhere, as they say on Code Switch. Yes, yes. It will. And you know what? People sadly would rather spite Black people and watch everyone burn than stop being racist and everyone succeed together. That is a wild thing to think about. Like, you're that mad. We're all going to drown if you keep doing this. And you're like, I don't give a fuck because you're going to drown first, Negro. That is an objectively wild thought. That's objectively wild. It's a very good documentary. I wish I could remember the name. Paloma Nicole, this reminds me of the Anniston, Alabama Monsanto case. Oh, I need to look into this. They literally destroyed that town. My paternal side is from there, and I'm certain that was the cause of premature deaths of my dad and lots of my family. I'm sorry about that, Paloma. It's likely true. There are close to there as well. So Monsanto, if you're not familiar, is the oh my gosh, what is the word for them? Awful is not a good enough word. Evil, honestly. Truly, this evil ass agriculture company that has, I think they do more than agriculture now, but they have taken over large swaths of what is farmland, and they are most famous for creating one type of corn. We're all eating in America GMO corn that is very bad for you, and they have specifically engineered it in a way that is not susceptible to certain things, but every once in a while, because they've engineered it in this wild ass way, everything dies. It's complete nonsense. And there are there are huge not lawsuits yet, actually, studies going on similarly related to this about Cancer Alley, which is in Louisiana, where they have essentially built factories in mostly Black cities and Black towns across Louisiana and the Delta, and people have a 100% higher chance than the average US resident of cancer, of all these awful things. And people are trying to push back and be like, hey, stop putting these factories in our town. And the corporations are like, whatever. It's just Black people over here. We're just going to do what we want to do. Oh, yeah. Charleston gives me the creeps. I've been to Charleston. It creeped me out. The food was excellent, but it creeped me out so bad. I was like, something about this place? I still need to watch P-Valley K. I learned about the segregation prom from P-Valley, child. I need to watch P-Valley. It's on my long list. Adrian, exactly. They're deliberately trying to drive them out. And they're trying to figure out what is the most effective way to drive them out. Because certain people, you can buy people's land. Certain people are like, I don't care how much money you buy me. My family worked this land. We are not leaving. That's that. All right. Okay. Right? Same. And then whenever I think of that, I think of his rap he did to mock all of us that were like, hey, I like back then of you. And he's like, ha ha, it's never coming back. Kanye is a wild person. Like, sometimes I have to laugh and then I remember that he is objectively harmful and has done so much harmful things. I'm like, sir, please. Remember when he tried to run for president just to get Trump votes? What? Mm-mm-mm. Lamara Hayes, white supremacy is more concerned with reputation than action. It is worse to be called a racist than the racist actions that would lead to that label. Exactly. So we should start calling them the racist more. It's like, oh, you did this racist thing, so you're a racist. That will get more actions out of us. That more actions for us. Okay, clean water is a human right. So every time these conversations come up, I am more and more floored. Exactly. It's a human right. Also, we're paying for it. As somebody in this country, you pay taxes, you pay federal taxes, and depending, some states don't have state tax. You might pay state taxes. So we are paying for it. And as someone who's in this country, we should all want the other person down the street or down the county or down the state to, be all right and be able to have clean water. Okay. The news, okay, that's a great point, Jerry. The news made it seem as if the storms caused the pumps to break down. Reminds me of Flint, Michigan. Exactly. And when the news first started, they're like, oh, look at this awful storm. And, our poor water treatment center, and it's like, stop lying. The water treatment center was already on the backup one because the original one was not working because the city has been systemically defunded. And because the city does not, because of white flight, the city does not have enough water bills. There's not enough people to sustain the city, but that doesn't mean the people living there, the 100 and odd thousand people, should not have access to clean water. Like, that's crazy. Listen, the Deep South governments and their love of state rights, is going to be a literal death of people in those states. And Roe v. Wade and the overturning of that is showing that. Listen, the day off is objectively wild in Mississippi for a Confederate Day. That's wild. That's crazy. I feel like during election, he's probably like, let me just round up some of them. Because that's actually a good point, Jonathan. He definitely has that I don't like Black people look unless it's election time look about him. Because at a certain point, he would have to get a certain amount of the Black votes if because the state of Mississippi is 40% Black. However, I think how he's getting around this, and I would have to look into this, so this would just be a guess based off of what I've seen in other states, is gerrymandering. So when you look at, depending on the state's laws, certain states don't do popular votes. They do votes by the county. So if you live in a county that is specifically designed to where you have less than the amount of Black people in that specific county, you don't necessarily have to win the popular vote, which is how, at a larger scale, you can see the president can lose the popular vote and still win the presidency. States are similar, but it depends on the specific state law. So I don't know if that's what he's doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what he's doing. Because how you get 40% of them are not voting for you. All right. Their mascot is a ghost. Must be dopey. This is a great point, actually. This is a great point. The Confederacy didn't lose. They got reparations, sharecroppers, convict labor, and monuments. You know what? That is a great point. That is a great point. They lost the battle and won the war. Because sharecropping is essentially slavery. Sharecropping is you're not paying people next to nothing. So you're not really paying them. The Klan popped up to keep everyone in line and to terrify and terrorize Black people for years. This is a great point. I'm going to stop saying the Confederacy lost. Thank you for this. Yep. Which is interesting to me. Well, of course, they would never allow them to put it there, but the lynching memorial is in Alabama. I really would love to see it. To just go. and pay like respects to the memorial. I realized after I said, I was like, Stephanie, that sounds bad. It didn't come out in a linear way. Oh God. Casey Block, I get livid every time the politicians talk about crime. For the most part, in my opinion, crime is a direct result of people lacking things, and that is almost never talked about. Exactly. Crime is a, what is the word? Product of a system. Same as poverty. Poverty is the outcome when you forcibly push people, you don't pay them enough. What the outcome is usually poverty. Crime is the same thing. Like if I'm starving and I've been starving long enough, well, your sandwich is my sandwich now. It is what it is. So exactly, Kale. If he wanted to reduce crime, then he needs to work on reducing the poverty rates. Exactly. But it's easier to keep the poverty rates that way and then blame people and be like, see, look at all of you. Mississippi has been on brand racist through and through. They had to remove slavery from their laws in the 90s. Yeah, through and through they have, which shows the resilience of the Black people that live in Mississippi, that all these years have been like, no, screw you. It's mine. Like I built this, I'm not leaving. And I feel like donating to that mutual aid that I put in there is a good help, as well as supporting, the broader community in Jackson, Mississippi, even if, we don't live there. All right. These are great comments. Thank you. I'm learning things as well. Eggs Genesis. It's giving poor people should stay miserable. Exactly. Like he said, nope, y'all can't have no pool. Y'all can't have no planetarium. I love the planetarium. I haven't been in years because of the panorama, but the planetarium is such like a nice learning space. Y'all can't, learn how to do golf or just walk around in a nice park. Awful. Yes. Just awful. Listen. Okay, let me catch up. How these so-called council officials aren't doing time is incredible. It's incredible to me too. I agree. And I think Flint, Michigan is an example of that this country is never going to prosecute people for upholding systemic racism and policies. This country is to a point where they're like, oh, if you're a government official, like, do what you want to do. Because they should have prosecuted the people involved in the Flint, Michigan water issues. They should have prosecuted them. Lead in children, they should have thrown them under the jail. Okay. Courtney, I want them to flip the state politically so bad. There was a few years ago, I think actually what year, what year? Maybe 2019 when Joseph was running and they flipped Georgia and other places. Specifically like Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, I saw a lot of like state senators very much or people that were running for state senator talking about rebuilding the Black South and trying to educate people. And that was the first time I learned, it was in 2019, that Mississippi is the blackest state by proportion in the United States, trying to educate people on the fact that like, hey, this is a kind of a lie that we've been told that everyone left during the Great Migration. The Great Migration, when a lot of Black Americans moved from down south to up north, a lot of Black Americans did, but not everyone left. There are still large swaths of Black people there, which is evidence because I have like lots of friends in Miami. Is always interesting. There are very few Black people in Miami who all the generations go back to Miami. Most of them, like their grandparents or their great-grandparents, were from Mississippi or Alabama. I have a lot of friends, so they would spend the summers in Mississippi and Alabama. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, what's over? There's other Black people there? I was always shocked. Like it never like clicked in my mind. And I think the more we learn about like, hey, yeah, there are actually spaces for us that are not in New York. Because child, New York is also segregated. New York is segregated. They just will smile at you about it. They will smile at you. They'll smile at you and pretend. They'll smile and pretend. Exactly. Simply Dolores. If they leave, then gentrification will take over and Jackson, Mississippi will be the new Id City. So they shouldn't leave. It's theirs. And it's a shame. It is a shame. Yes, come on with the old sayings. Yes, sir, don't piss on my leg and then tell me it's raining. That's a water truck at your house. The man said, you know what? This is not a designated site. It's just there. And there are 305 people in here right now. So like the video. It's at 305, so I looked at it. That to me is just kind of wild. Like, sir, how are you gonna lie to people? And then be like, you're making up conspiracies. It's not a gas tank. My dad drives a gas tank. I know what it looks like. I was like, that's not a gas tank. They look similar, but nope, the shape is a little different. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is a great question. I'm not sure. Can the governor be recalled? A lot of residents in New Orleans want the mayor's re-election recalled. That's interesting. I'm not sure. Listen, and do. Like, come on. That it's objectively wild that America has essentially de-invested from Black cities, Black counties, Black neighborhoods, purposefully, across the board. Wow. That's crazy, KB. Flint's infrastructure is still under contract. They just approved spending to update their pipes this past February in 2022. When this issue started in 2000, the issue was brought to national attention in 2014 because the issue obviously preceded that. This is a great point, Jamila. Now can we talk about how lead poisoning and behavioral issues are connected and how these schools are quick to call a Black baby anything other than worthy and start the school to prison pipeline? Yes. And there are so many studies that show Black children are more likely to be suspended at 2-3 times the rate. Every year you see a video of a poor little Black kid who, was tired or they were upset or whatever. They threw a tantrum and next thing you know, they're in handcuffs. You're handcuffing children their children throw tantrums. That's what they do. They're like little humans that do what they want to do. And if you don't teach them and if their needs aren't being met, they're just going to throw a tantrum. Like, that's normal behavior. Sad. Agreed. The defunding of the education system makes me so angry. I completely agree. Because it hurts everyone to defund the education system, as we are seeing, because some people just say wild shit. And you're just like, what? You can't possibly believe that. And they believe it. They believe it and they act on it. And we're past the point where people used to claim that racism is ignorance. No, it's a choice. It's a specific choice that you have made to choose foolishness and nonsense. Oh, this. I did that Trump video. I did it. I recorded it and I started editing it. And to be honest, in my spirit, I was like, I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to deal with his little friends on the internet that have no life because they just act a fool. So I'll finish editing that video. I did it last week too, to be honest. And I sat there maybe 2 weeks ago. The video's been sitting there a while. So I think I was going to upload it to Patreon for all the tears because it's just not worth it. People are so, I don't know why, enamored with him, and they will not heed any type of corrective action about his actions, that the man is a fool, that the man is causing straight up commotion. Obviously, he's a racist. They don't care about that part because they are probably racist too. And all these things. So that reminded me that video will get posted. Listen, yep, Courtney. Joseph and other establishment Democrats always fight for Republican votes talking about law and order every time, which is why I can't wait till we have a Labor Party. Like, this two-party system is nonsense. Yes, Nubia, I forget that you're from Miami too, girl. Yes, the pork and beans area looks completely different now. That shit is wild. That shit is objectively wild to me. Shayna was telling me, my best friend, because she grew up in Overtown. So she's like, Stephanie, can you believe? And I was like, that's wild. They're redoing all of Miami and they are removing Black people faster than you can say white on rice. They are just, oh, no, remove. For a long time, I was thinking of moving home and I'm like, oh, why? What? It's just nonsense. Yep, Black capitalism is not a solution. It's not a solution. Listen. One day we're going to talk about this because the absolute shock on my face in sixth grade, when did this occur? In the 7th grade, when I realized that it's not everybody, but it's a lot of y'all, and we got to talk about it eventually. Certain Black people from Latin countries don't identify as Black. I was confused. When I tell you I was confused, I was technically, by terms of identification in my middle school, one of 2 Black kids. By my eyeballs, there was a good 40 of us. Most of them were Dominican or Black human. They did not identify as Black at that time. It was very confusing, the conversations of being like, what do you mean you're not? What are you talking about? Like, they're like, absolutely not. No, girl, I'm not one of those. And I'm like, but we are one of those. I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna argue with y'all right now about this. Ooh, yeah. Racism in Latinidad, we have to have a specific conversation about, because it's confusing. And I think now that time has passed, now we can at least have the conversation because more people are willing to engage in it. You could not have that conversation 10, 20 years ago. People are like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I talking about? All right. So let me... Oh, is that the name? Is that the name of the documentary? Prom Night in Mississippi? That might be the name of the documentary. I just scrolled really fast to go down because I realized I've kept y'all over the hour. I gotta go get some dinner. All right. Oh, I want to read the comments though. I'm like, hold on. Yeah, he seems a little confused. He seems a little confused. We'll talk about it. We will talk about it. Gordon Plaza is known as Cancer Alley. The residents received a $35 million relocation award for various stalled city projects. The land will be converted into a solar energy farm. Oh, that's good. That's good to know. Yep, gerrymandering and voter disenfranchisement. Yeah, that's likely how, out of the last 5 governors in Mississippi, only 4 of them have been Republican. And Mississippi also has one of the highest rates where if you are convicted of a felony in Mississippi, you are not allowed to vote. And of course, because Black people are disproportionately targeted for crimes, I believe it might be around 15% in Mississippi, Black people are not eligible to vote. So it makes huge differences. Ronnie, I currently live in Jackson, and it's sad because there have been several water boil alerts since I moved here in October 2021. Exactly. We're sending you a big hug, and hopefully the mutual aid can help as well. And also, hopefully more people will begin talking about that this is not a one-off. This is a large systemic issue that is occurring to people. Oh, wow. The JSU students probably have it the worst right now. No running water, porta potties, and outdoor showers. Shaking my head. And also, like, for people that aren't familiar with the damn temperature right now, it's hot as hell. It's hot as hell in Mississippi right now. I agree, Terracotta Kim. I have been a Dem all my life. I've never been this conflicted about voting for the next presidential election. I feel if we Black people keep giving our votes, they'll never change, but voting Republican isn't it? I agree. Because we gave our votes for Joe, and Joe is like, Joe is slapping us all in the face. Joe said, I know I told y'all I'd defund the police, but actually no. And I know that most of you, on average, Black people owe $50,000, but it's really going to be 10 and maybe 20 if you get lucky. Like, Joe is not giving a modicum of what he said he was going to give. Nothing. All right, so I think we're getting towards the bottom. So V Carter with the specifics. Mississippi is 58% white, 37% Black, and then Native American Choctaw, tribe reservation there, and other races. Thank you for that. Yes. Okay, so Chicago takes the cake in terms of large cities that are segregated. Chicago is wildly segregated. Like, they don't even hide it over there. They're like, well, anyways, I'm like, it's crazy. And companies that are based in Chicago barely hire any Black people. I've worked at companies that have Chicago offices. You go into the office and nothing, just purely white people. There are no Hispanic people, which is wild because there's a large Mexican population in Chicago. So it's objectively wild. I'm like, how do you not have one Hispanic person in here? This is crazy. And never any Black people. And you're just like, what? Wild. Yes, Fannie Lou Hamer. Dana Speaks Finances Research. Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman of the civil rights movement, that from Mississippi, and she went against the men in the movement because they were trying to tell her what Mississippi needs. Yes. Excellent recommendation. Listen, shout out to the Publix subs. Also has been made aware to me that Publix is not created equal across all the states. So Publix in Miami subs specifically, Publix in Florida, and I don't claim the rest of Florida, but Publix in Florida is great. Publix in Florida is great. Oh, I clicked on it as soon as you said Shayna. I was thinking, how does she know I'm here? Hey, girl. Listen, I can't. The amount of my dad loves to argue with people. That man is bold. The older he gets, he just be bold. The amount of arguments he's gotten into with our neighbors, beginning to argue with them. Like when the elections were going on. Oh my God, wild. Proud of him though. Proud of him. I feel like we have to work on his running skills. So just in case, like he could run to the front door and go in the house because it's a mess. It's a mess. Right. Oh, I don't know what this part was for. Did they mean they aren't Black American or not Black period? I don't know what that part was. Oh. Hopefully nothing crazy. Hello to London. Ciao. I disappoint them every time. I'll be like, nope, negative. I don't know what it is. Me and the abuelas argue sometimes. We get in arguments. They be rude, man. Sometimes they're rude. And then I'm like, we have to argue. We have to argue now because you have some grandchildren that look like me. So we're going to get to argument now. It's a whole other conversation because, again, I'm very much in support of when we're having conversations, we get treated very outside of Miami. Miami is an anomaly. Outside of Miami, Black people and Hispanic people, when you look at environmental racism, when you look at voter disenfranchisement, when you look at forced poverty, largely get treated very much the same. Black people always worse, 100%. Largely get treated very much the same. However, because of the anti-Blackness within Latinidad, we can't be having solidarity all the time. The solidarity, we don't get there, but sometimes we do. So I would say a large amount of, well, all of them, because I wouldn't be friends with them if not, but all of my Latin friends are very much pro-Black and very much like, once you choose that life, you got to go arguing with your family members because it's ingrained. It's very jarring sometimes when you have like these conversations about it. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to say the word POC until we are in agreement that anti-Blackness is the root of a lot of these problems. Okay. So listen, very interesting. So Black is a construct actually created by the Queen, created by England. Yeah. All of us in the Caribbean have been labeled Black since the day we got stolen. However, that's very much how that works. So anti-Blackness is worldwide. You got anti-Blackness in the Caribbean is rampant. God bless the people of Trinidad. They had their independence the other day. The poor Black Trinis. They're going through it. They are going through it. It's a different conversation, but yeah. Listen, that was always an interesting thing. Yes. As a Mexican immigrant, I can attest that our identity was built around being mestizo, mixed, so it does run counter to American identity. Yeah, certain parts are different. And I think it's also interesting too. So if you look at which we won't talk about it too much because it usually causes consternation sometimes if you don't have the full conversation. But if you look at, you have the English-speaking Caribbean, and when people think Caribbean, that's a default setting of Caribbean. Reggae, dancehall, soca's, Jamaicans, Trinis, Bajans, Grenadians, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Bahamas. I'm forgetting some islands. People are getting upset. All the islands. And then you also have Spanish-speaking Caribbean people. So that large identify as Latinidad. So the culture is different. They're not eating curry. The rest of us are eating curry. However, large amounts of Caribbean Latinidad is very much Black. And it's very interesting when you get into conversations and you look at somebody and you're like, oh, we could be brothers and sisters. And they're like, no, absolutely not. You're like, oh, okay, cool. It's an interesting thing. So I would say like full on. Oh, actually, who's a good? Celia Cruz is a good example. Celia Cruz is very much Black. A good example. I think there's always confusion because the people who are claiming to be Afro-Latina these days, girl, is giving no. But that's again a longer conversation. It's a longer conversation. There are full Black people in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean and in like Honduras, Panama. I have a lot of Afro-Panamanian neighbors, like full, yeah. But it's because I would say the root of that is always like lack of education around the topic. It's lack of education. That's what the root of colonization is divide and conquer. Here goes slavery. Put all these people here. We don't care about them. The average enslaved person in the Caribbean died after 7 years. They never envisioned that we would still exist. So now that we exist, I think it is imperative that we learn more about each other. And I think the more we learn about each other, then we can find cohesion. That is my very willful thinking, wishful thinking on that. Listen. Oh, yeah. Oh, child, I know. My sister-in-law is Mexican. I know. They be hard to get along with sometimes. The white Cubans in Miami. And I'm always very vocal about that. And they know. They be acting wild sometimes. I'm like, all right, cool. Listen. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. Oh, hold on. I want to see the comments. I was like, we started this conversation. We shouldn't have started. Are we going to talk about it? And treating Black people bad. Are we going to talk about it? We have to talk about this. We will do some more, because I want to do some more diaspora conversation. So we will talk about this, because I do think the lie of America is always to act like America is the world. When as Black people, like our world is so much larger. Our world is so much larger than this place. So, we could learn more about that. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. I'm going to let y'all go to dinner since we have, delved into all the things. But again, I dropped it earlier. Let me drop it again if you're just tuning in. And I will make sure to pin this as well. If you have, a few coins to spare, go ahead and, send some money to the mutual aid fund for the residents of Jackson, Mississippi, because the government is not helping them in the swiftness they need to help these people. So there's that. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. Yeah. Listen, we're going to have a whole colonization in the diaspora conversation, because it's wild. It's wild. We're all getting systemically disenfranchised at varying points. But then what hurts my spirit personally is when we then don't treat each other with kindness. Because it's enough people not treating us with kindness. So we'll do it. We'll slowly do it in phases. We'll do it in phases and have these conversations. But I appreciate y'all. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it's a little bit long. And I will catch y'all tomorrow, maybe. Tomorrow. I want to film a video and hopefully post it tomorrow. So have a good evening and early morning to the UK. Bye.